Part 5. Propositions 36 to 40 of the Ethics by Spinoza. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The Ethics by Benedict de Spinoza. Translated by R.H.M. Alves. Part 5. Propositions 36 to 40. Proposition 36. The intellectual love of the mind towards God is that very love of God, whereby God loves himself, not in so far as he is infinite, but in so far as he can be explained through the essence of the human mind regarded under the form of eternity. In other words, the intellectual love of the mind towards God is part of the infinite love wherewith God loves himself. Proof. This love of the mind must be referred to the activities of the mind. Part 5, Proposition 32, Corollary, and Part 3, Proposition 3. It is itself indeed an activity whereby the mind regards itself accompanied by the idea of God as cause. Part 5, Proposition 32 and Corollary. That is, Part 1, Proposition 25 Corollary, and Part 2, Proposition 11 Corollary. An activity whereby God, in so far as he can be explained through the human mind, regards himself accompanied by the idea of himself. Therefore, by the last proposition, this love of the mind is part of the infinite love wherewith God loves himself. Quader demonstrandum. Corollary. Hence it follows that God, in so far as he loves himself, loves man, and consequently that the love of God towards man and the intellectual love of the mind towards God are identical. Note. From what has been said, we clearly understand wherein our salvation, or blessedness, or freedom consists, namely, in the constant and eternal love towards God, or in God's love towards man. This love of blessedness is, in the Bible, called glory, and not undeservedly. For whether this love be referred to God or to the mind, it may rightly be called acquiescence of spirit, which, definitions of the emotions, definitions 25 and 30, is not really distinguished from glory. In so far as it is referred to God, it is, Part 5, Proposition 35, pleasure, if we may still use that term, accompanied by the idea of itself, and in so far as it is referred to the mind, it is the same. Part 5, Proposition 27. Again, since the essence of our mind consists solely in knowledge, whereof the beginning and the foundation is God, Part 1, Proposition 15, and Part 2, Proposition 47 note, it becomes clear to us in what manner and way our mind, as to its essence and existence, follows from the divine nature and constantly depends on God. I have thought it worthwhile here to call attention to this, in order to show by this example how the knowledge of particular things, which I have called intuitive or of the third kind, Part 2, Proposition 40, Note 2, is potent and more powerful than the universal knowledge, which I have styled knowledge of the second kind. For, although in Part 1 I showed in general terms that all things, and consequently also the human mind, depend as to their essence and existence on God, yet that demonstration, though legitimate and placed beyond the chances of doubt, does not affect our mind so much as when the same conclusion is derived from the actual essence of some particular thing, which we say depends on God. Proposition 37. There is nothing in nature which is contrary to this intellectual love, or which can take it away. Proof. This intellectual love follows necessarily from the nature of the mind, in so far as the latter is regarded through the nature of God as an eternal truth. Part 5, Propositions 33 and 29. If, therefore, there should be anything which would be contrary to this love, that thing would be contrary to that which is true. Consequently, that which should be able to take away this love would cause that which is true to be false, an obvious absurdity. Therefore, there is nothing in nature which, etc. Quod erat demonstrandum. Note. The axiom of Part 4 has reference to particular things, in so far as they are regarded in relation to a given time and place. Of this, I think, no one can doubt. Proposition 38. In proportion as the mind understands more things by the second and third kind of knowledge, it is less subject to those emotions which are evil, and stands in less fear of death. Proof. The mind's essence consists in knowledge. Part 2, Proposition 11. Therefore, in proportion as the mind understands more things by the second and third kinds of knowledge, the greater will be the part of it that endures. Part 5, Propositions 29 and 23. And consequently, by the last proposition, the greater will be the part that is not touched by the emotions, which are contrary to our nature, or, in other words, evil. Part 4, Proposition 30. Thus, in proportion as the mind understands more things by the second and third kinds of knowledge, the greater will be the part of it that remains unimpaired, and consequently less subject to emotions, etc. Quod erat demonstrandum. Note. Hence we understand that point which I touched on in Part 4, Proposition 39 note, and which I promised to explain in this part, namely, that death becomes less hurtful in proportion as the mind's clear and distinct knowledge is greater, and consequently in proportion as the mind loves God more. Again, since from the third kind of knowledge arises the highest possible acquiescence, Part 5, Proposition 27, it follows that the human mind can attain to being of such a nature that the part thereof which we have shown to perish with the body, Part 5, Proposition 21, should be of little importance when compared with the part which endures. But I will soon treat of the subject at greater length. Proposition 39. He who possesses a body capable of the greatest number of activities possesses a mind whereof the greatest part is eternal. Proof. He who possesses a body capable of the greatest number of activities is least agitated by those emotions which are evil. Part 4, Proposition 38, that is, Part 4, Proposition 30, by those emotions which are contrary to our nature. Therefore, Part 5, Proposition 10, he possesses the power of arranging and associating the modifications of the body according to the intellectual order, and consequently of bringing it about that all the modifications of the body should be referred to the idea of God. Whence it will come to pass that Part 5, Proposition 15, he will be affected with love towards God, which Part 5, Proposition 16, must occupy or constitute the chief part of the mind. Therefore, Part 5, Proposition 33, such a man will possess a mind whereof the chief part is eternal. Quod erat demonstrandum. Note. Since human bodies are capable of the greatest number of activities, There is no doubt but that they may be of such a nature that they may be referred to minds possessing a great knowledge of themselves and of God, and whereof the greatest or chief part is eternal, and therefore that they should scarcely fear death. But, in order that this may be understood more clearly, we must here call to mind that we live in a state of perpetual variation, and according as we are changed for the better or the worse, we are called happy or unhappy. For he who from being an infant or a child becomes a corpse is called unhappy, whereas it is set down to happiness if we have been able to live through the whole period of life with a sound mind in a sound body. And in reality, he who, as in the case of an infant or a child, has a body capable of very few activities, and depending for the most part on external causes, has a mind which, considered in itself alone, is scarcely conscious of itself, or of God, or of things; whereas he who has a body capable of very many activities has a mind which, considered in itself alone, is highly conscious of itself, of God, and of things. In this life, therefore, we primarily endeavour to bring it about that the body of a child, in so far as its nature allows and conduces thereto, may be changed into something else capable of very many activities, and referable to a mind which is highly conscious of itself, of God, and of things. And we desire so to change it, that what is referred to its imagination and memory may become insignificant in comparison with its intellect, as I have already said in the note to the last proposition. Proposition 40. In proportion as each thing possesses more of perfection, so is it more active and less passive, and vice versa, in proportion as it is more active, so is it more perfect. Proof. In proportion as each thing is more perfect, it possesses more of reality. Part II, Definition 6. And consequently, Part 3, Proposition 3 and note, it is to that extent more active and less passive. This demonstration may be reversed, and thus prove that in proportion as a thing is more active, so is it more perfect. Quader demonstrandum. Corollary. Hence it follows that the part of the mind which endures, be it great or small, is more perfect than the rest. For the eternal part of the mind, Part 5, Propositions 23 and 29, is the understanding, through which alone we are said to act. Part 3, Proposition 3. The part which we have shown to perish is the imagination. Part 5, Proposition 21, through which only we are said to be passive. Part 3, Proposition 3, and the general definitions of the emotions. Therefore, the former, be it great or small, is more perfect than the latter. Quader demonstrandum. Note. Such are the doctrines which I had purposed to set forth concerning the mind, in so far as it is regarded without relation to the body. Whence, as also from Part 1, Proposition 21, and other places, it is plain that our mind, in so far as it understands, is an eternal mode of thinking, which is determined by another eternal mode of thinking, and this other by a third, and so on to infinity, so that all taken together at once constitute the eternal and infinite intellect of God. End of Part 5, Propositions 36 to 40.